call it a herky-jerky schedule. They have basically had a bunch of days off, and they're not going to be playing the Canucks on the Friday night now. Previous to that, not even a month ago, less than that, they had a bunch of days off in Montreal. COVID reared its ugly head, and the Canadians couldn't play any games for a week. And now the same thing's happened to the Vancouver Canucks, although that was a longer period of time. It's affected the Oilers' schedule, even though the Oilers themselves have not had yet a case of COVID among their ranks. How does this affect a team? I guess you could talk about the team or players or everybody involved in a hockey team.
We talked about that a little bit the other day with Coach Dave Tippett. Hockey players are creatures of habit. They get to this point in the season when there's about 15, 16 games left. They're used to playing, practicing, playing, maybe playing on consecutive nights. But they're used to that routine of playing, practice, playing, practice, playing, practice. And I think it's tough to disrupt that routine. And you kind of feel bad for the Oilers in a sense that they really didn't do anything to cause this. This is kind of a situation where it's kind of happening around them, and they've been affected by it. It's one of those things that they probably wouldn't want a week-long break right now because they were trying to get into a rhythm, and now I think they're going to have to try and find that rhythm again. But it's not an easy thing to do.
Rhythm, that's exactly the word I was kind of trying to think of, and there you brought it up. It's the rhythm. I mean, I know, every team goes through, jags, and they go through, it's peaks and valleys. And every team in the NHL, not just Edmonton, not just teams in a certain division, or not just teams in the States, but everybody probably realized at the beginning of this sort of thing could happen. So, I would imagine players, coaches, everybody involved would probably think, yeah, there might be a time when we have to, take a pause when we're not expecting it. I don't think anybody really knows what that's like until it actually happens. Is that right?
Well, yeah, they knew that this was a possibility, and they saw it happen early on. Some of the divisions in the United States. You saw the outbreak with the Dallas Stars, and they had a bunch of games canceled. And there were some other teams that had a bunch of games canceled. So you saw this happening away from the North Division. And for a while there, the North Division was lucky because they hadn't had any games canceled. But you see, it only takes one or two teams to kind of really disrupt the entire process here, and I think that's what we're seeing right now. But they were anticipating that this would happen. I think a lot of the players would be naive if they didn't think that their schedule was not going to be disrupted the way things were going. Eventually, your schedule was going to get disrupted. It was in the cards. It was inevitable, and you're just waiting for it to happen. And you're right. Until it happens, you don't know how you're going to react to it. And I think right now that the Oilers reacted to it when it happened in Montreal, they knew that was a situation. They reacted, I thought, pretty well to it. And then they came back, and they had a game tacked onto their road trip, which they probably didn't think it was really fair. And then they had the situation with Vancouver where they had that game thrown in against Calgary on the day that they were going to celebrate Kobe Cave's life, the memorial. And so that was a tough thing to do, to get up emotionally to play that game. So, but this is stuff that they were anticipating, and then now that it's here, you just have to go with the flow, and you have to really just try and deal with it the best you can. And Connor McDavid said it best. He goes, the scheduling is tough, and it's a bad situation, but compared to what other things are going on right now, they're kind of fortunate. They still get to go to work where other people don't get to go to work or don't get to go to school and things like that. So I think they're looking at it in that broad scope. Like, things could always be worse.
I suppose one thing the Oilers and every team in the Canadian division can, think about when it comes to the Canucks and their COVID problems, playing havoc with the schedule, is every team is going to be affected more or less. They're going to have games have been rescheduled, 4 games in 6 night situations, those sorts of things. It's not just going to happen to the Oilers, is it?
No, it's going to happen to every team, and you probably look and somehow. Every team will eventually be affected by this in the league. Somehow they'll all have games rescheduled. And that's the thing. It's such a trickle-down effect that when it affects one team, it affects the entire division. And it's a situation where the games are so tightly bunched in. I know they left a week at the end of the schedule to try and make up some of those games, but that might not be enough. And the NHL is in a tough situation here because they want to finish the season before the Olympics. And I think they're under pressure to finish the season before the Olympics because of some of the TV deals they have in the United States and maybe some of the TV deals up here with CBC. The Olympics starts in 100 days. So time is really precious right now, and they're going to have to jam all that in. And I think they realize that, and they know that, and they saw that in the schedule. And when they said, okay, we're going to play 56 games, hopefully we'll be as affected by this. It's tough to anticipate. And they did give themselves a little buffer room with the 1 week at the end of the season. It's a tough situation because one team can affect the entire division.
Would the NHL ever consider dropping games, like, finishing the year where teams don't play the same number of games and just base everything off win percentage, like what happened last year when the regular season was cut short?
Yeah, they may have to, and you look at the situation last year where they did go with winning percentage, and then they had to play in tournament to try and make things fair. They may have to, but if you look at a situation with the Canucks and if they're too far out of the playoffs, and if you have two non-playoff teams towards the end, do you really need to play those games? It's not unprecedented. In Major League Baseball, sometimes teams don't play 162 games towards the end of the year, or they don't make up those rainouts or whatever. You look at the standings, some teams will play 158 at the end of the year and things like that, and it might affect stats and things like that. But I think it's something that the NHL really has to look at, and I know that they are hoping by the last week of the season or the last 10 days of the season that the playoff spots are kind of solidified, and they don't really have to worry about a team in or out more so than kind of positioning. But you look at the way the North Division is developing, and Calgary suddenly are kind of making a surge here, and they're trying to catch Montreal. Those games at the end of the year might be very, very big. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. They're also restricted by the CBA, where you can't play 3 games in 3 nights in this league. That is not allowed. You can only play back-to-backs in this league, and so that's going to be tough for the NHL to shoehorn in some games when you're restricted from playing 3 and 3.
There are some teams in the United States where players have received their vaccines, and obviously in Canada, that's not the case yet. I don't know how much of a factor that might play down the road. It's impossible to tell at this point. But if the playoffs are going to be starting here in theory in a month or so, that who knows? Like, what if the playoffs get interrupted by a COVID outbreak in Canada?
That's another contentious issue right now, is that if you're a hockey player in Canada, regardless if you're Canadian or American, and you're seeing not only the NHL players in the United States, but the NBA players in the United States, the MLS players in the United States, the baseball players in the United States, all getting vaccinated and allowing those leagues to proceed maybe with fewer disruptions. And you're up here in Canada and you can't get vaccinated because you're at the back of the line. I can understand how that would be frustrating. And you see it from both sides. It's tough to say, well, hockey players should be vaccinated over people that are really vulnerable, over healthcare workers, over teachers, over people that are in those situations that are vulnerable to getting the virus. So it's a tough situation. I know the league would love to have all the teams vaccinated. That would really save, that would really unburden some stress heading into the playoffs. And right now it looks like in the U.S. those teams will be vaccinated. But in Canada, who knows when that's going to happen with the way that the vaccines are being rolled out and with the way things are. The NHLers are at the back of the line. And I think that's a situation that is really might hamper things going down the road